Sarah Matthews had always been different. While other girls her age were playing with dolls and learning to braid their hair, she was in her backyard learning combat, moved from her father, a retired Marine drill sergeant. Her mother had died when she was 7, leaving her father to raise her alone. He did the only thing he knew how to do. He trained her like a soldier. By the time Sarah turned 18, she could take down men twice her size without breaking a sweat. Her father had taught her everything: hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, tactical thinking, and, most importantly, how to read people. She could spot a threat from across a room and neutralize it before most people even realized danger was present. But Sarah didn't want to follow in her father's military footsteps. Instead, she chose to become a teacher. She believed education was more powerful than violence, that words could change the world better than weapons. Her father disagreed, but respected her choice. He made her promise one thing, though. If anyone ever threatened her, she would use everything he had taught her. Sarah moved to the small coastal town of Millbrook to teach at the local elementary school. The town was peaceful, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. She rented a small cottage near the beach and settled into her new life. The children loved her, the parents respected her, and she felt like she had finally found her place in the world. For 3 years, Sarah lived quietly in Millbrook. She taught 2nd grade, volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends, and took long walks on the beach every evening. The only hint of her unusual background was her morning routine. She still did her combat training every day at dawn, away from prying eyes. Old habits die hard, her father always said. The trouble started on a Tuesday in October. Sarah was walking home from school when she noticed a black SUV following her. At first, she thought it was just coincidence. The town was small, and there were only so many routes through it. But when the same vehicle appeared 3 more times that week, always keeping its distance, never close enough for her to see the driver clearly, she knew she was being watched. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She started varying her routes home, checking for patterns in the surveillance, and documenting everything she observed. The SUV had tinted windows and out-of-state plates. There were at least 2 people inside, possibly more. They were professionals. They knew how to maintain distance and avoid detection by ordinary people. But Sarah wasn't ordinary people. On Friday evening, Sarah decided to confront the situation head-on. Instead of going straight home after school, she walked to the town's main shopping district and ducked into Miller's hardware store. She waited by the window, watching the street. Sure enough, the black SUV drove slowly past, the occupants clearly searching for her. Old Mr. Miller, the store owner, noticed her strange behavior. "Everything all right, Miss Matthews?" he asked with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah forced a smile. "Just thought I saw someone I knew. Must have been mistaken." She purchased a few items she didn't really need and left through the back exit, making her way home through the alley system she had mapped out months ago as part of her automatic threat assessment of the town. That weekend, Sarah called her father. Without revealing the specific details, she mentioned that she felt like someone might be watching her. Her father's response was immediate and serious. "Trust your instincts, Sarah. They've kept you alive this long. If someone is watching you, there's a reason. Have you made any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt you?" Sarah thought carefully. She had lived quietly in Millbrook for 3 years. She hadn't dated anyone seriously, hadn't gotten involved in any town politics or controversies. Her life was intentionally boring and peaceful. "I can't think of anyone, Dad. I've been careful to stay under the radar." "Sometimes staying under the radar is exactly what draws attention," her father said grimly. "Some people notice when others are too careful, too quiet. Keep your guard up, and remember everything I taught you. If someone wants to test you, make sure they understand exactly what they're dealing with." Monday morning brought new developments. Sarah arrived at school to find her principal, Mrs. Henderson, waiting for her with a worried expression. "Sarah, I need to speak with you privately," she said, ushering her into the office. "There were some men here Friday afternoon asking about you," Mrs. Henderson explained. "They said they were doing a background check for a teaching position you had applied for in another district. But something fell off about them. They asked very specific questions about your daily routine, your background, your family. I told them I couldn't discuss personnel matters, and they left, but I wanted you to know." Sarah's blood ran cold. This was escalating beyond simple surveillance. Someone was actively investigating her, trying to learn her patterns and vulnerabilities. Did they leave any identification? Business cards, They showed badges, said they were from the state education department. But I've dealt with the state people before, and these men were different. More intense, if that makes sense. They wore suits and had this military bearing about them. Military bearing. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Could this be connected to her father's service? Some old enemy from his military days who would track her down? Or was this something entirely different? Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Henderson. If anyone else comes asking about me, please call me immediately. That afternoon, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going home after school, she drove to the next town over and visited an internet cafe. Using the anonymous computer access, she began researching her own digital footprint, looking for any connections that might explain why someone was interested in her. What she found made her stomach drop. Buried deep in an obscure military history forum was a discussion about her father's service record. Someone had posted detailed information about Master Sergeant John Matthews, including his distinguished combat record, his training methods, and, most importantly, mentions of how he had trained his daughter to be even more dangerous than he was. The post was recent, only 2 weeks old. Someone had been researching her father and had discovered that he had a daughter living quietly in a small coastal town, working as a teacher. But why would anyone care about that information? Sarah printed the forum discussion and drove home, her mind working through tactical scenarios. If someone was interested in her father's training methods, they might want to test those methods. Military contractors were always looking for new training techniques, new approaches to combat instruction. Some of them weren't too particular about how they acquired that knowledge. As she pulled into her driveway, Sarah noticed immediately that something was wrong. Her front door, which she always locked, was standing slightly open. The small piece of tape she had placed across the gap between the door and frame, an old trick her father had taught her, was broken. Someone had been inside her house. Sarah parked at the end of her driveway and sat in her car for several minutes, observing her house and the surrounding area. Everything looked normal on the surface, but her training told her otherwise. The curtains in her living room window were positioned differently than she had left them. The small flower pot by her front door had been moved slightly to the right. Professional work, but not perfect. Whoever had searched her house wanted her to know they had been there. This was a message, a demonstration of capability. They were telling her that nowhere was safe, that they could reach her anywhere, anytime. Sarah reached into her glove compartment and pulled out the emergency phone her father had given her years ago. It was a secure line that connected directly to his personal network of military contacts. She had never used it before, but her father had been clear. If she ever felt truly threatened, this was her lifeline. The phone rang twice before her father answered. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Dad, I need help. Someone searched my house. They've been watching me for days. I found information online suggesting they're interested in your training methods, specifically how you train me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When her father spoke again, his voice was cold and hard in a way Sarah hadn't heard since her childhood training sessions. "Sarah, listen to me very carefully. Do not go into that house. Do not collect anything. Drive to the police station and wait there while I make some calls." "Dad, what's going on? Who would be interested in me?" "There are people in this world who collect specialists, Sarah. Military contractors, private security firms, even criminal organizations. They're always looking for unique skills, and your combination of training and cover as a small-town teacher would be very valuable to the right buyer." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Someone wasn't just interested in her father's training methods. They were interested in her. They wanted to recruit her, or worse, test her capabilities for their own purposes. "What do I do?" "For now, you stay safe, and let me handle this. I still have friends in the community, people who owe me favors. But, Sarah, if these people make a move on you directly, don't hold back. Use everything I taught you. These aren't schoolyard bullies or local troublemakers. If they're willing to track you down and search your house, they're serious players." Sarah drove to the police station and parked in the most visible spot she could find. She didn't go inside. She knew local police wouldn't be able to help with this kind of threat. But the location provided witnesses and security cameras, making it less likely that anyone would try to approach her directly. While she waited for her father call back, Sarah reviewed everything she knew about her situation. Professional surveillance team, military-style background investigation, house search designed to send a message. These were the actions of people who operated outside normal legal channels. They had resources, training, and, most importantly, they weren't afraid to escalate. Her father called back within an hour. Sarah, I made some inquiries. There's a private military contractor called Blackwater North that's been recruiting specialists for high-risk assignments overseas. They typically target former military personnel, but recently they've been expanding their search to include people with unconventional backgrounds. So, they want to recruit me? That's the best-case scenario. Worst case, they want to test your abilities for their training programs. Some of these contractors make money by developing new combat techniques and then selling them to the highest bidder. If they think you represent a new approach to training, they might want to study you. Study me how? Another long silence. Sarah, these people don't always ask permission. Sometimes they create situations to observe how their targets respond under pressure. Simulated attacks, manufactured crises, controlled confrontations. As if summoned by her father's words, Sarah noticed a familiar black SUV pulling into the police station parking lot. It parked several spaces away from her car, and she could see at least two figures inside, watching her. Dad, they're here. At the police station. That's actually good news. It means they're still trying to stay within legal boundaries. They won't try anything at a police station. But, Sarah, this is your warning. They're done with surveillance. Next time you see them, it won't be from a distance. What should I do? Come home. Pack light. Bring only what you absolutely need. I'll arrange for you to stay with some friends of mine until we figure out how to handle this. Sarah looked at the black SUV in her rearview mirror. The occupants showed no signs of moving. They were content to wait, to watch, to let her know they could find her anywhere. Running would only delay the inevitable confrontation. No, Dad, I'm not running. You taught me better than that. Sarah, these aren't random criminals. These are trained professionals with resources and backing. So am I. Thanks to you. You spent 15 years training me to handle exactly this kind of situation. If they want to test me, let them test me. But it's going to happen on my terms, not theirs. Sarah could hear her father's pride and concern warring in his voice. If you're going to do this, do it smart. Control the situation. Choose the ground. Make them come to you instead of letting them set up the scenario. I've got an idea. There's an old warehouse district on the edge of town. Lots of open space, multiple exits, no civilians. If I can draw them there, I can control the engagement. Sarah, remember what I always told you about facing multiple opponents. Never let them surround you. Use their numbers against them. Strike fast and hard, then move before they can coordinate a response. The lessons came flooding back, muscle memory and tactical thinking combining into a coherent plan. And if you're outnumbered, make them come at you one at a time. Use terrain to funnel them. Turn their advantages into disadvantages. That's my girl. But, Sarah, if this goes bad, if there are too many of them or they have resources you can't handle, you run. No shame in tactical retreat. Live to fight another day. Sarah ended the call and sat in her car, watching the black SUV in her mirror. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Soon it would be dark, and darkness favored those who knew how to use it. She started her engine and pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward home. As expected, the black SUV followed at a discreet distance. Sarah drove slowly, making it easy for them to track her. She wanted them confident, relaxed, thinking they were in control of the situation. Instead of going to her house, Sarah drove to the warehouse district on the far side of town. The area had been abandoned for years after the fishing industry collapsed. Most of the buildings were empty shells, but the infrastructure was still solid. Concrete floors, steel beams, multiple levels, perfect for what she had in mind. Sarah parked her car in front of the largest warehouse and walked inside, knowing her followers would see her enter. The building was exactly as she remembered from her earlier reconnaissance. She had explored every inch of the town during her first few months in Millbrook, part of her automatic threat assessment routine. The warehouse was 3 stories tall, with a maze of corridors, storage rooms, and machinery spaces. Multiple stairwells provided vertical movement options, and large windows on each floor offered sightlines to the surrounding area. Most importantly, there were at least 6 different exits, making it impossible for a small team to cover all escape routes. Sarah positioned herself on the 2nd floor, in a room that provided a clear view of the main entrance while offering multiple fallback positions. She had maybe 10 minutes before her followers worked up the nerve to come after her. Time enough to run through her father's lessons one more time. Violence is never the first option, he had always said. But when it becomes necessary, it must be swift, decisive, and overwhelming. Give your opponent no time to think, no chance to coordinate, no opportunity to recover. Sarah heard car doors slamming outside, followed by the sound of multiple sets of footsteps approaching the building. At least 4 people moving in tactical formation, professional military or law enforcement background, based on the rhythm and coordination of their movement. The footsteps stopped at the entrance. Someone was talking in low voices, probably coordinating their approach. Sarah smiled grimly. They were treating this like a standard building search, not realizing that their target had deliberately chosen this location and was waiting for them. A voice called out from below, amplified to carry through the building. "Miss Matthews, we know you're in there. We just want to talk. We have a business proposition that might interest you." Business proposition? Sarah almost laughed. After days of surveillance, background investigation, and breaking into her house, they wanted to talk business. These people really thought she was just a naive school teacher who would be impressed by their resources and intimidated into cooperation. "I tried to warn you," Sarah called back, her voice echoing through the empty warehouse. "I told you I'm a Marine combat master, but you didn't listen." "Miss Matthews, we're not here to hurt you. We represent a legitimate business opportunity. Military consulting work, very well compensated. Please come down, and we can discuss this professionally." Sarah moved silently to a new position, using the industrial equipment and support pillars for cover. Through a window, she could see the black SUV parked outside. No additional vehicles, which meant she was dealing with whoever had been following her, probably 4 people maximum. "You broke into my house," Sarah called out, now from a different location. The echo made it impossible to pinpoint her exact position. "You investigated my background without permission. You've been stalking me for days. This isn't how legitimate businesses operate. There are some misunderstandings in our approach," the voice admitted. "We're prepared to compensate you for any inconvenience. Please just come down and talk with us." Sarah heard footsteps entering the building. Heavy boots on concrete, trying to move quietly, but not quite succeeding. At least 3 people spreading out to search the first floor. They were being careful, professional, but they were also operating in her chosen environment. The warehouse had been Sarah's backup plan since her first week in Millbrook. If she ever needed a place to make a stand, this would be it. She had spent hours exploring every corner, mapping sightlines and escape routes, identifying defensive positions and potential weapons. Her father had taught her to always have a bolt hole, a place where she could control the terms of engagement. "Last chance," Sarah called out. "Leave now, and we can pretend this never happened. Keep coming, and you'll learn exactly what Marine combat training produces." The response was the sound of footsteps on the metal staircase leading to the second floor. They had made their choice. Sarah moved into position behind a large industrial machine that provided cover while offering a clear view of the stairwell entrance. She controlled her breathing, centered her mind, and prepared to show these people exactly what 15 years of military training could produce. The first man appeared at the top of the stairs, moving carefully with what looked like a tactical flashlight in his hand. He was dressed in dark clothing, military-style boots, and moved with the controlled precision of someone with professional training. But his mistake was obvious to Sarah. He was focused on the shadows ahead of him, not considering vertical angles or elevated positions. Sarah waited until he was fully committed to entering the room before she moved. Her father's training took over completely. Assess, engage, neutralize, move. The man never knew what hit him. 3 seconds later, he was unconscious on the floor, his flashlight rolling away into the darkness. Sarah had already moved to a new position, ready for the next challenger. The real test was just beginning. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat as she waited in her new position, pressed against a concrete support pillar that offered cover from multiple angles. Below, she knew the remaining team members were processing what had just happened. Their point man had gone silent, which meant either he had found something or something had found him. Sarah's father had drilled into her the importance of psychological warfare. "Fear is your greatest weapon," he had always said. "An enemy who's scared makes mistakes. An enemy who's confused loses focus. Use their imagination against them." From her concealed position, Sarah could hear urgent whispers from the first floor. The remaining team members were trying to establish communication with their missing colleague. When they received no response, the whispers became more animated. They were losing control of the situation, and they knew it. "Martinez, report." The voice carried clearly through the warehouse. Professional military terminology, confirming Sarah's assessment of their background. These weren't common criminals or amateur contractors. They were trained operatives, which meant they were also dangerous when cornered. Sarah moved silently to a position that allowed her to observe the stairwell. She could see a second figure at the bottom of the stairs, hesitating. He knew his partner had encountered trouble, but he didn't know what kind or how serious. The uncertainty was eating at him. Martinez. The voice was sharper now, edged with concern and growing anger. Sound off. Sarah decided to help with their communication problem. She picked up a small piece of metal debris from the warehouse floor and threw it down the corridor, away from her position. The sound echoed through the building, suggesting movement in the wrong direction. The reaction was immediate. She heard rapid footsteps as at least 2 people moved toward the sound. They were splitting up, trying to cover more ground, making themselves vulnerable to exactly the kind of tactics her father had trained her to exploit. Never fight fair, he had always said. Fair fights are for sports and movies. Real combat is about winning, period. Use every advantage, exploit every weakness, and never give your enemy a chance to recover. Sarah waited until she heard footsteps on the metal stairs again before making her move. This time, 2 men were approaching together, moving in a coordinated tactical formation. They had learned from their partner's mistake and were being more careful. But careful wasn't enough against someone who had been training for this scenario her entire life. The first man appeared at the top of the stairs, weapon drawn, scanning the room methodically. His partner was right behind him, covering a different angle. Professional technique, but they were operating in unfamiliar territory, while Sarah knew every inch of this space. Sarah struck from above. She had positioned herself on a maintenance platform that overlooked the stairwell entrance. As the 2 men entered the room below her, she dropped down between them, landing silently behind the second man, while the first was still focused on the shadows ahead. Her father's hand-to-hand combat training was based on military techniques designed to neutralize threats quickly and efficiently. No flashy moves or unnecessary complexity, just biomechanics, leverage, and precise application of force to vulnerable points. The second man went down without making a sound. Sarah had disrupted his balance while simultaneously cutting off his air supply, a technique that rendered opponents unconscious in seconds when applied correctly. Before his partner could react to the sudden movement behind him, Sarah was already in motion. The first man started to turn, but Sarah was inside his defensive perimeter before he could bring his weapon to bear. Another 3 seconds, another unconscious opponent. 2 down, at least 1 to go. Sarah dragged both unconscious men away from the stairwell and secured them with zip ties she had found in the warehouse. They would be out for at least 10 minutes, giving her time to deal with their remaining colleagues. She also relieved them of their weapons, 2 pistols, and what looked like military-grade communication equipment. The silence from below was ominous. Whoever was left knew they had lost contact with their entire search team. Sarah could almost feel their growing panic and desperation. Desperate people made dangerous choices. Miss Matthews, the voice from below, was different now. Harder, more authoritative. I don't know what you've done to my men, but this ends now. We try to do this the easy way. You've chosen the hard way. Sarah smiled grimly. Now, they were showing their true nature. The polite business proposition facade was gone, replaced by threats and intimidation. This was who they really were. Your men are alive, Sarah called back. But they're taking a little nap. Last chance to walk away. We're not walking away. We've invested too much time and resources in this operation. You're coming with us, one way or another. Then come and get me. Sarah heard movement below. Someone was talking on a radio or phone, calling for backup. That changed the tactical situation significantly. She had maybe 15 minutes before additional personnel arrived. Time to end this quickly. Instead of waiting for them to come to her, Sarah decided to take the initiative. She made her way to the far end of the second floor, where a freight elevator provided access to the first floor. The elevator wasn't operational, but the shaft offered a direct route down while avoiding the main stairwells they would be watching. Sarah had explored this route during her initial reconnaissance. The elevator cables were still intact, providing a secure way to rappel down to the first floor. More importantly, the elevator opened into a storage area that connected to the main warehouse floor through a series of corridors. As she prepared to descend, Sarah could hear voices from the main area below. At least 2 people, possibly 3. They were arguing about tactics, whether to wait for backup or press the assault. Professional disagreement between team members under stress. Sarah rappelled down the elevator shaft silently, using techniques her father had taught her for urban infiltration. She landed softly on the elevator car roof and climbed down into the storage area. From here, she could access the main warehouse floor while remaining undetected. The storage area was filled with old equipment and machinery, providing excellent cover for movement. Sarah worked her way toward the voices, using her ears to track their positions. They had set up some kind of command post near the main entrance, probably to coordinate with incoming backup. Through a gap in the machinery, Sarah could see them clearly for the first time. 3 men in dark tactical gear, all carrying professional weapons and communication equipment. One was older, clearly the team leader, while the other 2 were younger and nervous. They kept glancing toward the stairwells, waiting for their missing colleagues to report. "Boss, maybe we should wait for the backup team," one of the younger men said. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." "We're dealing with one woman," the leader replied harshly. "Train or not, she's still just one person." Martinez and his team probably got careless, walked into some kind of trap. "We go in smart, we go in hard, we finish this." Sarah had heard enough. These people weren't going to give up, and backup was coming. Time to demonstrate exactly what just one woman could accomplish with the right training. She moved into position behind a large piece of machinery that provided cover while offering multiple approach angles to their position. The key was to separate them, prevent them from supporting each other, and use their own tactics against them. Sarah picked up a wrench from the floor and threw it hard against a metal surface on the far side of the warehouse. The resulting clang echoed through the space, drawing immediate attention. "There, storage area, east side." The leader pointed toward the sound. "Johnson, take the right flank. Peters, go left. I'll take center. Box her in, and don't take any chances." Perfect. They were splitting up exactly as Sarah had hoped. 3 individual targets instead of one coordinated team. Her father's lessons echoed in her mind. Divide and conquer. Make them fight your battle, not theirs. Sarah waited until they had committed to their movement before acting. Johnson was approaching her position from the right, moving carefully between pieces of machinery. He was being cautious, but his route was predictable. More importantly, he was now separated from his team members by obstacles that would prevent them from providing immediate support. Sarah let him get close enough to see the details of his tactical gear and the nervous tension in his movements. He knew he was walking into danger, but he was following orders. Professional discipline overriding personal survival instincts. When Johnson reached the machinery where Sarah was concealed, she struck without warning. Hand-to-hand combat in confined spaces required different techniques than open-area fighting. No room for extended movements or complex maneuvers. Just speed, precision, and overwhelming force applied to vulnerable points. Johnson went down hard, his weapon clattering away across the concrete floor. The sound echoed through the warehouse, immediately alerting his teammates to his location. "Johnson's down. East storage area." Peter's voice was sharp with adrenaline and fear. "Boss, this isn't some random teacher. This woman knows what she's doing." "I don't care if she's a Navy SEAL," the leader replied. "She's still outnumbered. Peters, maintain your position. I'm moving to Johnson's location." Sarah was already gone, using the maze of machinery and storage areas to relocate before Peters could reach Johnson's position. She needed to maintain the initiative, keep them reacting to her moves instead of executing their own plan. The warehouse was working perfectly as a combat environment. Multiple levels, numerous corridors, and enough obstacles to prevent clear sight lines while providing abundant cover for movement. Sarah could hear both remaining men calling out to each other, trying to coordinate their search while maintaining communication. Peters was moving more cautiously now, clearly shaken by the rapid elimination of his teammates. He was checking corners, scanning high and low, taking his time. Professional paranoia, keeping him alive, but also making him predictable. Sarah worked her way around behind him, using a maintenance corridor that connected to his search area. The key was patience. Let him get focused on searching ahead while she approached from behind. Another lesson from her father. The enemy you don't see is the most dangerous enemy of all. Peters never saw her coming. One moment he was scanning the shadows ahead. The next he was unconscious on the floor. Sarah secured his weapon and communication gear, then moved toward the final confrontation. The leader was alone now, and he knew it. Sarah could hear him speaking rapidly into his radio, probably updating his backup team on the situation. His voice was controlled, but tense. He was realizing that his simple extraction mission had turned into something very different. Control, this is Alpha Team. We have a situation here. Target is extremely hostile and well-trained. Request immediate backup and authorization for enhanced measures. Enhanced measures. Sarah didn't like the sound of that. These people were escalating beyond simple recruitment tactics. They were moving into territory where permanent solutions became acceptable options. Sarah decided it was time to end this conversation permanently. She emerged from cover and walked openly toward the leader's position, making no attempt at stealth or concealment. He had his back to her, focused on his radio communication. "You should have listened when I warned you," Sarah said quietly. The leader spun around, weapon raised, but Sarah was already inside his defensive perimeter. Years of training with her father had taught her that the most dangerous distance in combat was just outside arm's reach, close enough to be threatening, but too far to actually engage effectively. Sarah closed that distance before he could react. The fight was over in seconds. The leader was well-trained, but he had spent his career relying on weapons and team tactics. Sarah had been trained for exactly this scenario, outnumbered, outgunned, forced to rely on pure fighting skill and tactical thinking. When it was over, the warehouse was silent except for the sound of Sarah's controlled breathing. For professional operatives lay unconscious around the building, their weapons and equipment secured. Sarah's father had been right. 15 years of training had produced something extraordinary. Sarah gathered the communication equipment and weapons, then made her way to the roof of the warehouse. From there, she could observe the surrounding area and watch for the backup team that was certainly coming. She needed to understand what she was really dealing with before deciding her next move. The radio chatter told her everything she needed to know. The backup team was larger than the initial group, and they were discussing tactics that went far beyond simple recruitment. They were talking about containment, extraction, and disposal of witnesses. These people had moved past trying to recruit her. Now they saw her as a threat that needed to be eliminated. Sarah activated the emergency phone her father had given her. When he answered, she didn't bother with explanations. "Dad, I need immediate extraction. 4 down, unknown number incoming. They've escalated to lethal force authorization. Location, Industrial District, Miller's Warehouse. I'm on the roof, have clear sight lines to all approaches. Sarah, listen to me carefully. There's a boat docked half a mile north of your position. My friend, Captain Morrison, runs fishing charters out of there. He's waiting for my call. Can you reach the dock?" Sarah studied the terrain between her position and the harbor. Open ground for the first quarter mile, then residential streets leading to the waterfront. Doable, but risky if the backup team was already in the area. "I can make it, but I need a distraction. Something to draw their attention away from the harbor." Already handled. Local fire department is going to get an anonymous call about a gas leak in a warehouse district. Should bring enough official attention to make your friends very nervous about staying in the area. Sarah smiled. Her father still had connections, still knew how to work the system. "Dad, what are we really dealing with here? This isn't just some military contractor looking for recruits. I made more calls after we talked earlier. Blackwater North is a front company. The people really behind this are connected to some very dark operations. Human trafficking, illegal weapons sales, mercenary work in conflict zones. They don't just recruit specialists. They create them by whatever means necessary." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. These people weren't interested in offering her a job. They wanted to break her down and rebuild her as a weapon for their operations. The kind of work that destroyed souls and left people hollow shells of their former selves. "They picked the wrong target," Sarah said grimly. "Yes, they did. But, Sarah, this isn't over. These people don't give up easily, and they have resources we can't match in a direct confrontation. We need to be smart about this." Sarah could see vehicles approaching the warehouse district from multiple directions. At least 3 cars, possibly more. The backup team was larger than she had anticipated, and they were moving fast. "I need to go, Dad. See you at the extraction point." Sarah made her way down from the roof and began working toward the harbor. Behind her, she could hear the approaching vehicles and the sound of men shouting orders. They had found their unconscious colleagues and were not happy about it. The first quarter mile was the most dangerous, open ground with minimal cover. Sarah used every piece of terrain to her advantage, moving from shadow to shadow, using abandoned vehicles and industrial debris for concealment. Her father's urban warfare training paid off as she ghost-walked through territory that should have been impossible to cross undetected. As she reached the residential area, Sarah could hear sirens approaching from the south. The fire department was responding to the anonymous gas leak report, just as her father had promised. The timing was perfect. The backup team would have to either expose themselves by operating in front of official responders or pull back and wait for the situation to clear. Sarah reached the harbor just as Captain Morrison's fishing boat was preparing to leave the dock. He was a weathered man in his 60s, clearly one of her father's old military contacts. He took one look at her and nodded grimly. "You must be John's daughter. Heard you had some trouble tonight." "More than trouble. We need to leave now. Already planned for. We're going to take a little fishing trip, maybe spend a few days at sea while things cool down on shore." As the boat pulled away from the dock, Sarah could see vehicles converging on the warehouse district. Red and blue flashing lights from emergency responders mixed with the headlights of the backup team's cars. The chaos would buy them time, but Sarah knew this was far from over. Her father's voice crackled over the boat's radio. "Sarah, you there?" "I'm here, Dad. Safe for now." "Good. We need to talk about long-term strategy. These people aren't going to forget about you, and they're not going to forgive what happened tonight. We need to figure out how to end this permanently." Sarah looked back toward shore, where the lights were still flashing in the warehouse district. Somewhere out there, dangerous people were planning their next move. They had underestimated her once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. "Dad, I've been thinking, instead of running from these people, maybe it's time to take the fight to them." "Sarah, that's exactly the kind of thinking that gets people killed. These aren't random criminals. They're organized, well-funded, and connected. So are we. You train me to be better than their best operatives. Tonight proved that. Maybe it's time to use that training for something more than self-defense." The radio was quiet for a long moment. Where her father spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "We'll talk when you get here. But, Sarah, if you're serious about taking offensive action, you need to understand what that means. Once you cross that line, there's no going back to your quiet life as a teacher." Sarah looked out at the dark ocean ahead, then back toward shore where her old life was disappearing into the distance. "Dad, they crossed that line when they broke into my house. They crossed it again when they escalated to lethal force. I'm done running from bullies." The boat carried her into the darkness, away from immediate danger, but toward an uncertain future. Behind her, the lights of Millbrook grew smaller and smaller until they finally disappeared entirely. Sarah Matthews, elementary school teacher, was gone. What emerged from this night would be something entirely different. Something her enemies were going to wish they had never awakened. 3 days at sea gave Sarah time to think, plan, and, most importantly, to fully understand what she was facing. Captain Morrison's fishing boat had become a floating command center, equipped with secure communication gear that her father's network had provided. The transformation from peaceful fishing vessel to military operation was remarkable and slightly unsettling. Sarah's father, John Matthews, arrived by helicopter on the second day. Watching him rappel down from the aircraft onto the boat's deck, Sarah was reminded of just how extensive his military connections really were. Retired or not, Master Sergeant Matthews clearly still had friends in high places. "Dad, this is a lot more resources than I expected for a simple extraction," Sarah observed as the helicopter disappeared toward the horizon. John's expression was grim. "Sarah, this stopped being simple the moment they sent a professional hit team after you. I've been making calls, calling in favors, and what I've learned is disturbing. Blackwater North isn't just some military contractor. They're connected to a network that operates globally. Human trafficking, illegal weapons, mercenary operations in war zones. They have resources that rival some government agencies." Captain Morrison joined them on deck, carrying a folder thick with documents. "Your father asked me to run some background checks to my old intelligence contacts. What we found explains why they're so interested in you." Sarah took the folder and began reading. What she found made her blood run cold. Blackwater North was connected to something called the Artemis Program, a classified military research project that had been shut down officially but continued operating through private contractors. The program's goal was to develop enhanced human assets for deep cover operations. "Enhanced human assets," Sarah repeated. "They want to turn people into weapons." "Not just weapons," her father explained. "The perfect weapon. Someone with advanced combat training who can blend seamlessly into normal society. Someone who can go anywhere, access any situation, and neutralize targets without raising suspicion. Like a school teacher who can take down a team of professional operatives. Exactly. Sarah, you represent something they've been trying to create for years. The combination of your training and your civilian cover makes you incredibly valuable to their operations. Sarah continued reading the documents. The Artemis program had a success rate of less than 5%. Most candidates broke under the psychological conditioning required to turn them into compliant weapons. Those who didn't break often die during the enhanced combat training phase. They're not just trying to recruit me, Sarah realized. They want to study how it was created, then replicate the process. Which means they need you alive, but cooperative, Captain Morrison added. The team that came after you was trying to capture, not kill. But that changes now that you've demonstrated your capabilities. John nodded grimly. They'll escalate to lethal force if capture isn't possible. Dead, you're worthless to their research. Alive but uncooperative, you're a threat to their entire operation. Sarah closed the folder and looked out at the ocean. Her quiet life in Millbrook seemed like something from another lifetime. A peaceful dream that had been shattered by the reality of who she really was. There was no going back to teaching second grade and taking evening walks on the beach. What are our options? She asked. Run and hide, John said immediately. New identity, new location, keep moving, and stay under their radar. It's not much of a life, but it's a life. What's the other option? You already know. Take the fight to them. But, Sarah, that means becoming exactly what they want you to become, a weapon. The only difference is you'd be choosing your own targets. Sarah considered this for a long moment. Dad, how many people has this Artemis program killed or destroyed? John consulted his notes. Conservative estimate? Over 300 casualties in the past 5 years. Most were candidates who didn't survive the conditioning process. Others were people who got too close to their operations. And how many active assets do they have? Maybe a dozen. Highly trained killers who operate without conscience or question. They're responsible for assassinations, terrorism, and destabilization operations around the world. Sarah made her decision. Then running and hiding isn't really an option, is it? They'll keep doing this to other people. They'll keep killing innocents to create their weapons. Sarah, taking down an organization like this isn't a job for one person, no matter how well trained. Good thing I won't be doing it alone. Sarah looked at her father and Captain Morrison. You both have contacts, resources, people who owe you favors. I have skills and motivation. Together, we might be able to do something about this. Captain Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're talking about declaring war on people who make governments nervous. That's not a fishing expedition. That's a suicide mission. Maybe. Or maybe they've gotten comfortable operating in the shadows, picking on isolated targets who can't fight back effectively. What happens when someone fights back with their own methods? John was quiet for several minutes, clearly wrestling with the decision. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a lifetime of military service and the pain of watching good people suffer while bad people prospered. If we do this, we do it right. Military planning, proper intelligence, overwhelming force applied at precisely the right moments. No cowboy heroics, no unnecessary risks. Agreed. And if at any point the odds turn against us, we extract and disappear. Dead heroes don't save anyone. Understood. Captain Morrison shook his head. You Matthews family has a serious death wish. But I've seen what these Blackwater North people do, and someone needs to stop them. He paused, then grinned. Besides, I haven't had a good fight in years. Might be fun. Over the next 2 days, they developed what John called Operation Cleanup, a systematic campaign to dismantle Blackwater North's operations. The plan had 3 phases: intelligence gathering, strategic strikes against their infrastructure, and, finally, direct assault on their command structure. Phase 1 is the most important, John explained as they studied maps and organizational charts spread across the boat's cabin table. We need to know where they operate, who their people are, what resources they have, and, most importantly, where their leadership is located. How do we get that information without exposing ourselves? The same way intelligence agencies have always done it. We recruit assets inside their organization. People who have reasons to hate them as much as we do. Captain Morrison had contacts in the maritime security community who dealt with Blackwater North's shipping operations. Through careful investigation, they learned that the organization moved personnel and equipment through a network of cargo ships and private ports along the East Coast. Their main operational base is a private island off the Carolina coast, Morrison reported. Officially, it's a corporate retreat center. Unofficially, it's where they run their training programs and conduct their research. How many people? Maybe 50 to 75 at any given time. Mix of administration, training staff, security, and candidates. It's heavily fortified, but they rely on isolation and secrecy for primary security. Sarah studied the satellite photos Morrison had acquired. The island was roughly 2 miles long and half a mile wide, with a single deepwater harbor and what looked like military-style training facilities. This is where they broke those 300 people, and where they're planning to break more, John added. Sarah, if we hit this place, we need to be prepared for significant resistance. These aren't the contractors who came after you in Millbrook. This is their home ground, their best people, their most secure location. What about the candidates currently in training? Intelligence suggests there are always 4 to 6 people in various stages of the program at any given time. Some are there voluntarily, recruited with false promises of legitimate military work. Others are there against their will. Sarah felt anger building in her chest. We're not just stopping their operations. We're conducting a rescue mission, which makes it 10 times more complicated, John warned. Rescue operations require precision, speed, and perfect execution. One mistake, and everyone dies. Us and the people we're trying to save. Then we don't make mistakes. Captain Morrison spread out nautical charts showing the waters around the island. Getting there isn't the problem. Getting there undetected is. They have radar, patrol boats, and probably submarine detection equipment. This isn't some random island. It's a fortress. What about approaching from underwater? Sarah asked, studying the depth charts. Possible, but dangerous. The currents around the island are treacherous, and we need specialized equipment for a diving approach. Plus, we don't know what underwater defenses they might have. John pointed to a section of the chart showing shallow water on the island's north side. What about here? Too shallow for patrol boats, probably outside their primary radar coverage. Tidal flats, Morrison explained, only accessible at high tide, and even then, you'd need a boat with very shallow draft. But, you're right, they probably don't expect anyone to approach through there. Sarah was already formulating a plan. We don't need to bring a large force. Small team, surgical strike, extract the candidates, and eliminate their leadership before they can disperse the operation to other locations. How small? 3 people. Me for infiltration and combat, Dad for tactical coordination and support, Morrison for extraction and boat operations. Sarah, 3 people against 50 to 75? Dad, you taught me that superior numbers don't matter if they can't coordinate effectively. We hit them at night, take out their communications first, then create chaos while we extract the candidates. By the time they organize a response, we're gone. John studied the satellite photos again, clearly running tactical scenarios in his head. It could work, but only if we have perfect intelligence about their internal layout and security procedures. Then, we need to get someone inside. Morrison looked up from the charts. I might have an idea about that. There's a woman named Elena Vasquez who used to work for them as a medical technician. She quit 6 months ago and has been trying to expose their operations ever since. No one believes her because she doesn't have proof. Why did she quit? She saw what they were doing to people in the program. The psychological conditioning, the physical enhancement procedures, the disposal of failed candidates. She tried to report it to authorities, but Blackwater North has connections everywhere. Sarah felt a spark of hope. If she's willing to help us, she could be our way inside. It's dangerous for her. If they catch her helping us, she won't live long enough to regret it. More dangerous than letting them continue their operations. John nodded slowly. Set up a meeting. But we do it carefully off their radar, with escape routes planned in advance. 2 days later, Sarah found herself sitting in a small cafe in Savannah, Georgia, waiting to meet Elena Vasquez. The location had been chosen carefully, public enough to discourage violence, but with multiple exits and good sight lines to spot surveillance. Elena arrived exactly on time, a small woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and the careful demeanor of someone who had been looking over her shoulder for months. She sat down across from Sarah and immediately began speaking in low, urgent tones. "You're John Matthews' daughter. I've heard about what happened in Millbrook. They're very angry about that. Good. They should be angry, but they should also be afraid. Elena smiled grimly. They're not used to being afraid. These people operate with complete impunity. They take what they want, kill who they need to kill, and never face consequences. That's about to change. We need information about their island facility, layout, security procedures, daily routines, anything that can help us get inside. Getting inside isn't the problem. I still have access codes and security clearance. They never revoke my credentials because they don't want to create a paper trail that might raise questions. Sarah leaned forward. You're willing to go back in there? I've been planning to go back for months, but not just to expose them, to destroy them. Those people in the program, they're not volunteers. They're victims, and someone needs to help them. How many candidates are currently active? 6. For men, 2 women, all in different stages of conditioning. The newest arrival is a former teacher from California who was kidnapped 3 weeks ago. The oldest has been there for 8 months and is almost completely broken. Sarah felt sick. A teacher, they're specifically targeting people with backgrounds similar to yours. Teachers, social workers, medical professionals. People who chose helping professions, who have strong moral foundations. The theory is that breaking those people creates more loyal weapons because they become dependent on their handlers for purpose and identity. That ends now. Elena pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Building layouts, security rotations, personnel files, daily schedules. Everything you need to plan an assault. But you need to understand, once you start this, there's no going back. These people will hunt you forever. They're already hunting me. At least this way, I'm hunting them too. Sarah reviewed the documents quickly. The facility was more complex than the satellite photos had suggested. Underground levels housed the actual conditioning chambers and research labs. The surface buildings were mostly administrative and housing for staff. Elena, there's something else I need to ask. Are you willing to go in with us? We need someone who knows the internal procedures, who can access the secure areas. Elena was quiet for a long moment. I've been having nightmares about those people in the conditioning chambers. I hear them screaming, begging for help, and I wake up knowing I escaped while they're still trapped. She looked directly into Sarah's eyes. Yes, I'll go with you. It's going to be extremely dangerous. More dangerous than living with the knowledge that I could have helped them and chose safety instead. Sarah understood completely. When can you get us access? Tomorrow night. There's a supply boat that makes regular runs to the island. I can get you aboard as medical consultants. They're always bringing in specialists for the enhancement procedures. How long do we have once we're inside? 48 hours maximum before someone notices irregularities. But realistically, maybe 12 hours before your presence raises questions. Sarah thought about the timeline. 12 hours to infiltrate a fortified facility, locate and extract 6 captives, eliminate the leadership structure, and escape by sea. It was doable, but there was almost no margin for error. Elena, once we start this operation, you'll be as much of a target as we are. They'll know you helped us. Good. I want them to know. I want them to understand that their victims have allies, that someone is willing to fight back. Sarah stood up from the table. Then let's go save some lives and end this nightmare. That evening, Sarah called her father from the secure phone. Dad, we're going in tomorrow night. Elena Vasquez is our inside contact, and she's providing access and intelligence. Sarah, I've been thinking about this operation. The risks are extreme, and we're operating with minimal backup. The risks of not acting are worse. There are 6 people being tortured right now, and more will follow if we don't stop this. John was quiet for a moment. Your mother will be proud of you, you know. She always said you had the strongest moral compass of anyone she'd ever met. Mom would also say that having a moral compass is useless unless you're willing to follow it into dangerous territory. True enough. All right, we do this. But we do it by the book, my book. Military precision. No improvisation unless absolutely necessary. Agreed. See you at the rendezvous point. As Sarah ended the call, she realized that tomorrow night would determine everything. Either they would strike a decisive blow against an evil organization and save innocent lives, or they would all die trying. Either way, the quiet schoolteacher who had once walked peacefully on Millbrook's beaches was gone forever. In her place stood someone harder, more dangerous, and absolutely committed to stopping people who preyed on the innocent. Sarah Matthews was going to war, and she intended to win. The supply boat looked exactly like what it was, a working vessel designed to carry cargo and personnel to remote locations without attracting attention. Captain Morrison had arranged for Sarah and her father to be listed as medical consultants, complete with falsified credentials that would pass casual inspection. Elena met them at the dock wearing scrubs and a medical technician's badge. She looked nervous, but determined, clearly understanding the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Status report, John asked quietly as they boarded the vessel. 6 candidates, still active, all in different conditioning phases. Security rotation changes at midnight, giving us a 4-hour window before the next shift comes on duty. Most of the senior staff will be in the main administrative building for a late planning session. Sarah checked her equipment one final time. No weapons were visible. Everything had been concealed in medical supply cases that Elena had provided. How long to reach the island? 3 hours. We'll arrive at 11:30 p.m., just before the shift change. That gives us 30 minutes to get oriented and positioned before we make our move. The boat ride gave them time to review the plan one final time. Phase 1. Infiltrate the facility and take control of the security systems. Phase 2. Locate and extract the 6 captives. Phase 3. Neutralize the leadership and destroy their research data. Phase 4. Escape by sea before reinforcements could arrive. Simple in concept, extremely complex in execution. As they approached the island, Sarah could see lights scattered across the landscape. The administrative buildings Elena had described, guard posts at key locations, and the ominous underground entrances that led to the conditioning chambers. Remember, Elena whispered as they prepared to disembark. The moment we step off this boat, we're committed. There's no calling for help, no backup plan if things go wrong. Things won't go wrong, Sarah replied with quiet confidence. We've planned for every contingency. John checked his watch. 11:25 p.m. Right on schedule. The dock was minimally guarded, 2 security personnel who barely glanced at their medical credentials before waving them through. Elena's access codes worked perfectly, getting them into the main facility without triggering any alarms. Phase 1, Sarah whispered into her throat microphone. Moving to Security Center. The Security Center was located in the basement of the administrative building, protected by electronic locks and surveillance cameras. But Elena had provided detailed information about guard rotations and blind spots in the camera coverage. Sarah reached the Security Center at exactly 11:58 p.m. 2 guards were inside, monitoring multiple screens showing different areas of the facility. The shift change was due in 2 minutes, which meant reinforcements would be arriving soon. Sarah waited until 12 a.m. exactly before making her move. The timing had to be perfect. The new guards would be arriving at the entrance just as she neutralized the current shift, creating confusion about who was supposed to be where. Both guards went down without making a sound. Sarah's hand-to-hand combat training made short work of opponents who weren't expecting an attack. She immediately began shutting down the surveillance system and disabling the electronic locks throughout the facility. Phase 1 complete, she reported. Security systems offline. John's voice crackled through her earpiece. Confirmed. Moving to Phase 2. Elena led them through a maze of corridors toward the underground levels where the captives were being held. The facility was larger than the satellite photos had suggested, with multiple levels extending deep into the bedrock beneath the island. Conditioning chambers are on level 3, Elena explained as they descended stairwell. Each captive is held in individual cells designed for sensory deprivation and psychological manipulation. Sarah felt anger building as she saw the facility's true nature. This wasn't just a training center. It was a sophisticated torture complex designed to break human beings and rebuild them as weapons. Every detail had been planned to maximize psychological damage. How many guards on level 3? Usually 4, but with the security system down, they might have called for reinforcements from other areas. Sarah checked her weapon, a compact assault rifle that had been hidden in Elena's medical equipment cases. Dad, what's your status? Administrative building is secure. I've located their main computer systems and data storage. Give me 15 minutes to download everything and plant the charges. Copy that. Beginning Phase 2. Level 3 was a nightmare of sterile corridors and reinforced doors. Each conditioning chamber was soundproofed, designed to prevent captives from communicating with each other or coordinating any kind of resistance. Elena led them to the first chamber. Maria Santos, former social worker from Texas. She's been here for 2 months. Sarah looked through the small window in the door and saw a woman in her 30s, clearly malnourished and psychologically damaged. She was sitting in a corner, rocking back and forth, completely unresponsive to external stimuli. Can we get her out safely? I don't know. The conditioning process does permanent psychological damage. Some people never recover. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. These weren't soldiers who had volunteered for dangerous duty. They were innocent people who had been kidnapped and tortured. We get them all out, whatever it takes. Elena opened the door using her access codes. Maria looked up when they entered, but her eyes showed no recognition or hope. She had been broken so completely that she no longer reacted to changes in her environment. Maria, Elena said gently, "We're here to help you. We're going to get you out of here." No response. Sarah realized that extracting the captives was going to be more complicated than simply opening their doors. These people had been conditioned to distrust everyone, to expect that any apparent rescue was just another form of psychological manipulation. How long to get her responsive enough to move? Elena shook her head. Could be hours, could be days. The conditioning is designed to make people completely dependent on their handlers. Sarah made a command decision. We carry them out. All of them. Dad, change of plans. We need extraction for 6 non-ambulatory personnel. John's voice came through her earpiece. That's going to complicate things significantly. How non-ambulatory are we talking about? Severe psychological conditioning. They may not be able or willing to cooperate with evacuation. Understood. I'll contact Morrison and arrange for medical transport. Sarah and Elena moved methodically through the remaining chambers. Each captive was in a similar state, psychologically broken, physically weakened, completely unresponsive to outside intervention. The efficiency of the conditioning process was terrifying. The last chamber held the former teacher Elena had mentioned, a woman named Jennifer Walsh who had been kidnapped from her home in California 3 weeks earlier. Unlike the others, Jennifer showed some signs of awareness when they entered her cell. "Please," she whispered, "I just want to go home. I'll do whatever you want, just let me go home." Sarah knelt beside her. "Jennifer, my name is Sarah. I'm a teacher too, and I'm here to take you home. But I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say." Jennifer looked at her with desperate hope. "You're really here to help me? I promise. We're going to get you out of here, but you need to stay quiet and follow our instructions exactly." For the first time since entering the conditioning chambers, Sarah felt a spark of optimism. At least one of the captives was responsive enough to assist in her own rescue. "Elena, can you help me get the others mobile? I have sedatives that will make them easier to transport, but they'll be completely unconscious." Sarah considered the options. Carrying 6 unconscious people through a hostile facility would be extremely difficult, but trying to guide 6 traumatized and unresponsive people would be impossible. Do it. Whatever gets them out of here safely. While Elena administered the sedatives, Sarah's earpiece crackled with her father's voice. "Sarah, we have a problem. I'm detecting movement from the mainland. Looks like patrol boats heading this way. How long do we have?" "Maybe 30 minutes before they arrive." "And, Sarah, these aren't regular security patrols. This looks like a full military response." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Someone had discovered their infiltration and called for backup. The timeline had just compressed dramatically. "Dad, how much more time do you need with the computer systems?" 10 minutes for the download, another 5 to plant the charges, and set them for remote detonation. "Elena, how long to get all 6 captives ready for transport?" Elena was working rapidly, checking each person's vital signs after administering the sedatives. 5 minutes. But, Sarah, moving 6 unconscious people through this facility is going to take time we don't have. Sarah activated her throat microphone. "Morrison, we need immediate extraction. 6 unconscious packages. Hostile response incoming from the mainland." Morrison's voice was tense, but controlled. "I'm moving the boat to the north side of the island, the shallow water approach we discussed. Can you get the packages to that location?" Sarah studied the facility map Elena had provided. The North Beach was almost half a mile from their current location, through terrain that offered minimal cover. "Negative. Too far and too exposed. We need pickup at the main dock." "Sarah, the main dock will be the first place they look when the response team arrives. Then, we make sure they don't have time to look." Sarah made another command decision that would determine the outcome of the entire operation. "Change of plans. We're not trying to extract quietly anymore. Elena, can you trigger a facility-wide alarm?" "Yes, but why would we want to do that?" "Because chaos is our friend. If we can create enough confusion, the response team won't know what they're dealing with when they arrive. Sarah activated her microphone again. Dad, new plan. As soon as you finish with the computer systems, I want you to trigger every alarm in the facility. Fire suppression, security alerts, emergency evacuation, everything. Sarah, that will bring every guard in the facility to our location. Exactly. And when the response team arrives, they'll find their people dealing with a facility-wide crisis instead of an organized defense. John's laugh came through the earpiece. I always said you had a devious tactical mind. Give me 12 minutes. Elena had finished preparing the captives for transport. All 6 were unconscious, but stable, ready to be moved. Sarah looked at the small woman who had risked everything to help them. Elena, this is where we part ways. You've done more than enough. I'm not leaving without them. Elena, you're not trained for combat. Once the shooting starts, you'll be a liability. These people suffered because I didn't have the courage to act sooner. I'm not abandoning them now. Sarah recognized the determination in Elena's voice. It was the same commitment that had driven her to take on Blackwater North in the first place. Then, stay close and do exactly what I say. Sarah organized the evacuation like a military operation. Jennifer, the most responsive captive, was assigned to help guide the others. Elena took point, using her knowledge of the facility layout. Sarah brought up the rear, ready to deal with any pursuit. They began moving through the facility's corridors, carrying the unconscious captives on improvised stretchers Elena had prepared for medical equipment. It was slow going, but they made steady progress toward the upper levels. As they reached the main floor, every alarm in the facility suddenly activated simultaneously. Fire alarms, security alerts, emergency lighting. The entire building erupted in chaos. John had triggered the facility-wide crisis exactly as planned. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Security personnel throughout the facility began responding to multiple simultaneous emergencies, trying to determine what was real threat and what was false alarm. In the confusion, Sarah's team was able to move through areas that would normally have been heavily guarded. Phase 2 complete, Sarah reported. All packages secured. Moving to extraction point. Confirmed, John replied. Charges are planted and ready for remote detonation. I'm moving to provide cover for your extraction. Sarah could hear patrol boats approaching the island's harbor. The response team was arriving exactly as expected, but they were heading into a situation that was completely out of control. As Sarah's team reached the main dock, she could see Morrison's boat waiting in the darkness. The extraction point was clear, but she knew that wouldn't last long. Morrison, we're at the dock. 6 packages ready for immediate transport. Roger that. But, Sarah, those patrol boats are moving fast. We have maybe 5 minutes before they reach the harbor. Sarah began loading the unconscious captives onto Morrison's boat, while Elena and Jennifer helped stabilize them for the sea journey. Everything was working according to plan, but the margin for error was razor thin. Dad, what's your status? Extraction point secured, charges armed. Sarah, you need to know, I found something in their computer systems that changes everything. What kind of something? Names, addresses, targeting information for their next recruitment operations. They're not just running one facility. This is part of a network that spans multiple countries. Sarah felt the scope of their mission expanding exponentially. They weren't just shutting down one operation. They had stumbled onto something much larger and more dangerous. How many facilities? At least 6 that I can confer from the data. Probably more. Sarah realized that their rescue mission had just become the opening battle in a much larger war. But that was a problem for later. Right now, she had 6 lives to save and an island full of enemies to escape. Morrison, are we ready to go? Ready when you are. Sarah looked back toward the facility where emergency lights were still flashing and alarms were still wailing. John emerged from the administrative building and ran toward the dock as the sound of approaching patrol boats grew louder. Dad, time to go. John reached the boat just as the first patrol boat rounded the point and entered the harbor. Spotlights began sweeping the water, searching for threats. Morrison, get us out of here. The boat's engines roared to life, carrying them away from the dock just as armed personnel began deploying from the patrol boats. Behind them, the island erupted in chaos as security teams tried to understand what had happened. Sarah activated the remote detonator her father had given her. The administrative building disappeared in a ball of flame that lit up the night sky for miles. Secondary explosions followed as the charges John had planted throughout the facility destroyed computer systems, research data, and the conditioning chambers that had caused so much suffering. As Morrison's boat disappeared into the darkness, Sarah could see the patrol boats converging on the burning island. By the time they established control and began searching for survivors, the rescue team would be long gone. Jennifer Walsh, the teacher who had maintained enough awareness to assist in her own rescue, sat up weakly and looked at Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Are we really free?" "You're free," Sarah confirmed. "All of you are free." But even as she said it, Sarah knew their freedom had come at a price. They had struck a significant blow against Blackwater North, but they had also revealed themselves as active threats to the entire network. The war was just beginning. Elena checked on the other rescued captives, monitoring their vital signs and administering medical care. They're going to need extensive psychological treatment. The conditioning process did serious damage. They'll get whatever help they need, Sarah promised. All of them. John was studying the data he had downloaded from the facility's computer systems. "Sarah, this information is going to change everything. We know where they operate, who they target, how they recruit. We can shut down their entire network. Or die trying. John agreed. But these people deserve justice, and their future victims deserve protection. Sarah looked out at the dark ocean ahead, then back toward the burning island behind them. They had saved 6 lives tonight, and struck a blow against an evil organization. But she knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, other facilities were operating, other innocent people were being broken and rebuilt as weapons. The Artemis program was larger than they had imagined, and shutting it down would require resources, planning, and a level of commitment that would consume their lives. But Sarah had seen what these people did to innocent teachers, social workers, and other helping professionals. She had looked into Jennifer Walsh's eyes and seen the damage that psychological torture could inflict on a human soul. The quiet schoolteacher from Millbrook was gone forever, replaced by someone harder and more dangerous. Sarah Matthews was going to hunt down every facility, rescue every captive, and destroy every person who participated in the Artemis program. It was going to be a long war, but she intended to win it. 6 months after the island raid, Sarah Matthews stood in a secure facility in Montana, watching Jennifer Walsh teach a self-defense class to other survivors of the Artemis program. The transformation was remarkable. The broken woman they had rescued was becoming strong again, helping others heal while rebuilding her own life. "She's made incredible progress," Dr. Patricia Newman observed. Dr. Newman was a trauma specialist.